Welcome everyone, my name is Vishal Teckchandani. I'm a senior editor here at Livewire Markets, and in this episode I want to share with you 3 powerful changes I made to my superannuation strategy which have made a tremendous difference to my retirement outcomes and my projected retirement outcomes. Now the idea of this video is I want to give you a framework, building blocks and key indicators to help you understand whether your super fund is doing a good job for you or whether your super fund is killing your retirement ambitions and you perhaps need to look at making a change before it's too late. Now this video is particularly aimed at people in their 20s to 50s. Of course it's applicable for any age, but the earlier you take control of your super to maximize returns, lower your fees, the better off you're going to be once you hit your retirement age. So please grab a cup of coffee, clear out your morning. There's lots to share here. And what I'd love you to do is also head to the description and click on the article that I've published in relation to this video. All the tools, indicators, benchmarks, graphs that I'll talk about, they're all there in that article. And again, at the end, what I'd love you to do is log into your superannuation account and see if your fund is delivering for you based on some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So I want to kick this off with a bit of a story. Back in 2008, I started a job as a business reporter. It was a very, very tough year. I was covering the global financial crisis. And in early 2009, I took a break. I went on a road trip to Byron Bay, relaxed and recharged. And when I came back home, there was a letter on my desk from my super fund. And get this, the average superannuation fund in 2008 lost 19.5%. And my super fund, the one my employer put me in, a balanced option, lost 24.5%. I was gobsmacked. And what was particularly concerning was not just the 1-year performance, but the long-term performance, 5 years, 10 years. They were at the bottom quartile, or they were a bottom they were a bottom of the barrel performer versus relative to competitors in the industry. And I just thought, with returns like these, I'm just not going to be able to retire. So I decided I needed to make some changes. I needed to switch to a better super fund. But in order to switch to a better super fund, I needed to figure out what were the red flags with this one so I don't replicate picking an offering that's as bad. Okay? There are 3 red flags I want to walk you through, and I'd strongly encourage you to research your super fund to see if these red flags are there within what you're invested in. The first one is that my super fund used what's called a full multi-manager or fund of funds strategy. So you give your superannuation fund money, which they charge you investment fees to manage. They then distribute that money to other fund managers who also charge fees. Now, this is not necessarily a bad model, but it can be bad if it's done incorrectly. In this case, it was fully outsourced, so you're effectively paying a middleman to distribute your money to other fund managers to invest that money. And the fees from that added up to about 2%. Now, not every super fund can be expected to have expertise of every asset class. There's a place to appoint an external manager like global small caps and private markets. But what you want to look for is a fund that uses an internalized funds management model to some extent, because what that means is they're managing a good chunk of their money in-house, particularly for Australian equities and fixed income. If they're managing that in-house, they're able to keep their costs low. The second red flag was the insurance premiums. Believe it or not, I was paying nearly $1,000 a year for $50,000 of coverage. I was only 24 at the time. This was back in 2008. So in between the fees and the expensive insurance premiums, I found my contributions were just being gobbled up in costs. So very important to see how much you're paying in insurance premiums, and I'll walk through some benchmarks later on in this video. And the third red flag, this wasn't necessarily so much with the super fund, this was actually with my employer. I spoke to the person at my company who was responsible for the relationship and picking the super fund provider that they nominate for employees as their default fund. And I asked them, why are the fees this high and the performance this bad? And they said, well, Vish, we could have actually negotiated a lower fee, but we decided not to because because the super fund offered us extra service. And I asked them what extra service, and they said, well, the salesperson who comes into our office every 6 months to tell us how the fund has performed, why you should put more money into your super. That's part of the package, the golden package that they picked with the superannuation fund provider, and that's why the fee was kept as high as it was, because they didn't negotiate a lower rate, they negotiated better service, and I quite frankly question the value of that service. I think it's something that every superannuation fund provider should do for corporations that have nominated them to be their fund provider. So make sure you ask your employer the question, have you negotiated a better rate on behalf of employees? So based on those 3 red flags, I kind of thought about, hey, what's important to me here? And what's important to me is having good performance, having good insurance, because I want to keep my costs low so that I get to keep more of my money, and I want good performance so that I have a better outcome in retirement. So the first change I made out of the 3 big changes that I want to talk about is that I chose a fund with a good track record. So once I saw how badly my fund was performing, I needed to think about ways to verify and gain confidence that a super fund that I would pick would have sustainably good performance for the long term. And for that, I looked at four metrics that I'll walk you through. The first is I looked at their long-term performance over 3, 5, and 10 years. And because you want to see consistently good long-term performance, and preferably you want to see them consistently be named among the top 10 superannuation funds in Australia whenever the media publishes those, typically at the end of every financial year. Now, that's not to say past performance is a guarantee of future returns. You do need to do some digging behind the performance, especially if they're using unlisted assets to perhaps juice up some of those figures. You want to look at videos put out by the super fund, do some research on their chief investment officer and their investment team, see what they're saying in their fund commentary. So very important to verify all of that. The second key metric is I want to see my super fund use an internalized fund model. So again, like I said, there's absolutely a place to appoint external fund managers for things like global small caps, private markets, global infrastructure. I completely get that. But I want to see my fund be able to keep costs low by managing a chunk of their money in-house. And you'll actually find that good super funds lower their fees over time as they gain scale and they manage more of that money in-house. The third metric that I looked at was how easy is it to find the investment returns on that super fund's website. Believe it or not, some of them make it very difficult to find performance information. So you want to look for a super fund that's very transparent, doesn't make you go through a labyrinth of web pages to download an Excel sheet to see what the investment returns are. It should be clear-cut, upfront, and within just a few clicks. And the fourth metric you want to see is defensible costs. And I like to say defensible costs because I don't necessarily think chasing the lowest fees is the best strategy, because some of the funds that charge fees that are a bit higher actually deliver really good investment returns. So you need to balance out the fees you're paying with the investment returns that the fund is achieving, and perhaps it's also negotiated a good deal on its insurance premiums, so you're saving money on that part of on that side of things. Now, like I said, I did this exercise back in 2009, so more than a decade ago. I want to make it a bit easier for you. So on the screen, I'm going to show you the top 10 performing growth funds over the 10 years to the end of financial year 2025. This data is put together by a company called Chant West, which collects superannuation fund data and is pretty prominent in the media. And you can see the top 10 growth-oriented super funds on this list here. And what I'd love you to do is to log into your superannuation account and see if your fund is meeting at least the median return If it's doing better, that's great. If it's underperforming the average super fund, then you may want to ask some questions or consider perhaps picking a better option. I just want to make a quick note on fees as well. What is the ideal amount of a fee to pay? In the article, I will publish some information about fees, but I want to give you one quick benchmark. According to Australian Super, if you have a balance of $250,000, the average fee, which includes the admin fee, the investment management fees, the total operating costs, that should be about $2,000 a year, or 0.80%. Now, this doesn't include insurance, but the admin and the investment management fees should add up to about 0.80% on a balance of $250,000. So if you're paying below that, well, that's a good thing. But again, just a warning, you do want to balance low fees with good performance. If you're paying more than the average, you need to see if the performance justifying what you're paying. So the second change I made was I stopped playing it too safe and I invested for growth. And I want to kick this off by asking you and challenging you to think about whether you are taking too much risk with your superannuation by not taking enough risk. I often hear people, get concerned about their superannuation fund losing 6% or 10% in the odd year where there's a bear market. But they tend to stick to a balanced option, which delivers a pretty decent return over the long term. But if you look at this ChantWest table that I'm going to pop up on the screen here, you can see that by taking more risk and stepping up into a growth or a high growth or an all growth strategy, the long-term outcomes do tend to be better. So the median all growth fund in Australia over the last 15 years, we'll focus on the 15-year element of this table here, has delivered 9.9% in that time per annum. And if you look at the median balance fund has done 6.7%. There is a world of difference between 6.7% and 9.9%. So I think it's really important to ask yourself the question, if you don't need this money and you can't touch this money for 20, 30, 40 years, is it worth taking more risk? Again, just to be sure, this is not advice. I'm not encouraging people to go outside their risk tolerance. It might be a good conversation for you to have with an advisor, but it is certainly food for thought, because remember, even when you turn 60, you do need, you're going to possibly live till 85, 90, according to Australian life expectancy tables. So you need your money to last a long time, and you need to build up a pretty big balance in order to sustain yourself through retirement if you want to achieve a high quality of life. And the third change I made, which was really simple, was contributing more money to superannuation. I strongly urge you to look at the concessional caps and non-concessional caps and see how much more you can put into super. And I just want to illustrate this with a quick example to demonstrate the power of compounding. Let's say you're 25, you did a great job, and you got a $20,000 bonus from your employer. You could choose to spend all that money on a ritzy trip to Europe. Or perhaps you're a little bit more financially sensible and you decide to have a more modest trip to Europe, budget $10,000 for that, but then you put $10,000 into your super and you decide to leave it for 40 years based on the assumption that you're going to retire and cash out your money at 65. So to show you the outcome of that, I'm going to pop up a chart on the screen here. If you leave that money at age 25 for 40 years and we assume the ChantWest growth rate of 8% per annum, your $8,500 balance, because remember, you'll be getting hit with that 15% contributions tax on the way in, it will be worth nearly $175,000 over a 40-year period. However, let's say you get serious about super at age 45, which is still great, but you decide to leave that money in there for 20 years because you're going to cash out your super at 65. This is just an illustrative example. That $8,500 balance will only grow to just about $37,000. So a tremendous difference from the power of compounding, 40 years versus 20 years. So again, the more money you can sacrifice into super, at least $50 extra every week or every month, even that will make a tremendous difference to your retirement. I just want to also give you a quick bonus tip. If you are making all these changes with your super, I'd strongly encourage you to also look at your insurance, and this is a conversation you might also want to have with your advisor to make sure you select a good offering. But like I said at the beginning, I was getting ripped off with my insurance premiums. They were just very exorbitant. And in the article I've provided on livewiremarkets.com, I do showcase a table and some information about insurance premiums. And basically, a key benchmark to look at is for $100,000 worth of cover, you should be paying less than $300 in premiums per year for life insurance. So that's a benchmark to think about. So have a look at that table and look at whether your premiums are above the average or below the average of what is typically charged, so that you can understand whether you're getting ripped off from an insurance perspective or not. And of course, do think about whether you have adequate coverage. If something unfortunately was to happen to you, is your family going to be well looked after? Okay, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, if you're in your 20s to your 50s in particular, the earlier you take control of your super, the better. I'd really love it if you log into your superannuation fund and see if they're meeting the benchmarks that I talked about in this video. Are they delivering returns at or better than the average? Are you getting ripped off from an insurance perspective? I encourage you to challenge yourself and think about whether your risk profile is enough in terms of where you want to get to in retirement. Also, like I said, this is not investment advice. This is just general information from my experience that I'm providing. You may want to speak to an advisor in order to make an informed choice about making any potential switch.